You look at all the events of the last century, combined will have less of an effect than what's about to happen to us. The opportunities are astounding what you can find in terms of possibility for abundance and thriving due to the amount of change that's on our doorstep. And it's not little changes. It is going to be the most gargantuan change in 400 years in our civilization. The push that's going to happen, the response in these 8 billion people, you have to realize all these other past grand solar minimums, there were 1 billion people or less on the planet. This is the very first one where there's been 8 billion people. It's the very first one where there's been more than 1 billion people. What's going to happen when 8 billion people start thinking something? That's going to bend reality.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum, and then overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine.
I'm saying it's the hugest opportunity in human history, and that's my mind frame. My mind frame is we're coming at it with abundance, thriving. If you know how to grow your own food, you're safe. If you do any kind of minor preparation, you're going to get through this because you'll be prepared enough at least to get through the first 3 to 6 months of tumultuous times when others are not going to be able to. Then things will resettle, they'll reshift a bit, and then you'll be able to go with the flow as the changes are coming because you'll have that nest, that little bit of buffer, so you're not coming in at it with zero, with no preparation, no supplies, not knowing anything, not knowing how to grow food, don't know how to get water. Where's your nearest water source? How do you get there and get back if you don't have a car? Do you have a bike? How are you going to do that? See, these are the mental things here. Because I already know where the nearest water source is. I know I have a bike. I know I could rig it to put some buckets on. I know I could rig it to put bags on it. At least I know I have a way to go. And imagine waking up one day and you got no water and you're like, I don't even know where the closest water source is. Huge mental game difference, knowing, being a little prepared and having some of your own way out. It's a skill set. The people who aren't, they're going to be in serious trouble. They're going to be scared and terrified. And they got families, and they're going to be terrified and hungry and scared. And how do you explain to them what's going on? That's great in the beginning, but when people are really hungry, they do strange things. Welcome back for the second hour. I'm David Dubine, your host. Mini Ice Age Conversations here, Studio A, Revolution Radio. Talking about the crop losses, and I was talking about the siege of Leningrad before the break. And I was talking about people were eating the backing of the wallpaper. They were actually eating the glue off the back of their wallpaper to stay alive. To put, as they quoted it, anything in their stomachs. Anything. And it came to the point where people were eating fur coats as well. And belts. And the scary thing is they actually had a recipe for comparing on how to boil belts to make soup out of a belt that you wear around your waist with a buckle in it. Now, back then, belts were way healthier as well. You got to think about the amount of chemicals in our leather production today are far different than they were, 75 years ago now? Almost 80 years. So things that were available to keep people alive in even the most horrific conditions, people are eating fur coats, belts, the glue off the back of their wallpaper on their homes to stay alive. That option is not there for us now, period. And I'm not even saying that in joke. I mean, those people went through some of the most horrendous conditions for 3 years. When the food came in and the food delivery trucks came in, they thought it was a mirage after the siege ended. They couldn't actually eat either because their stomachs were so used to not having food that when they came in, doctors had to actually give people food so they didn't overeat or eat themselves to death because they didn't have enough food. This was one of the strange things that was going on. So when we talk about crop losses, it's starting to be a global phenomenon at the moment, and you're seeing it everywhere. It is everywhere. It's happening on all continents. On the Ice Age Farmer, we're talking about the decreased crop yields across the U.S. Now, one thing is happening, soya beans are absolutely going through the roof at the moment. Soya beans are having some of the best yield due to these weather changes of anything. So if you were long on soy, you just got burned. If you were long on anything else, you just made a mint. And then we get so grains are one thing. We're going to look at some index futures prices here in a minute. But I'm back over here at Fresh Plaza. I don't know if you're familiar with Fresh Plaza. They cover just agriculture across the planet, citrus, fruits. They don't really cover grains too much. That's more for Ag Web. So I'm giving you a couple resources here for you to look at so you can follow and track the crop losses yourself so you don't have to rely on other people. See, when you get into a conversation with somebody and you start talking about the crop losses being a global thing, and they say, well, prove it, then you know to go to Fresh Plaza and take them there so you can look at the citrus, fruit, stone fruits, etc. And then you know to go to a thing called AG Web, Ag Web, like Agriculture Web, Ag Web, to take a look at the grains and the grain harvests. And then you can go to Index Mundi, INDEX MUNDI, Index Mundi. So you can take a look at the crop pricing, and then you can go to the Chicago Board of Trade and all the other places that you can take them with the information to prove what is happening with our crop yields this year. Now, see, this one startling article in AP said the Arctic was the all-time warmest, but that's absolutely a fabricated lie, and I'm going to call out the AP right now because all the way until last week, the temperatures were below normal. They were below the 30-year running average. You can go to the DMI and check out the 80-degree north latitude up to the North Pole and see that that is a fabrication, and they keep pushing this narrative of it's hot, it's heat, Arctic's melting. Well, no, the Arctic has the 7th least amount of ice at the moment. 7th, not lowest.
And this episode's brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds since 1974. Full range of garden seeds, microgreen seeds, sprouting seeds, wheatgrass, grain seeds, flower seeds, herb seeds, and ground cover crop. I encourage you to take a look at their website, TrueLeafMarket.com, and they even have free starter guides there for you to learn how to grow sprouts, microgreens, herbs, and wheatgrass. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
So what they keep trying to do is push this narrative of it's still global warming, and they trying to wrap everybody into the politics. And they want to wedge everybody as much as they can. So if you notice an uptick of wedging between any possible way, socioeconomic, race, whatever it is, belief systems. See, what they're trying to do is wedge everybody at the moment, I believe. There's a wedging effort going on. So the only way I could possibly describe it is the media is now in the control mechanism device to distract you from all these food price rises and the crops being lost. Now, if it's being lost at this rate this year, next year is going to be exponentially higher in the crop losses. And see, this is what they're trying to dissuade you from looking at or even finding out about. So over on Fresh Plaza, this is just one example of one thing. Squash packers, we're talking about squash or pumpkins, the 3rd year of extremes. So Dutch pumpkin farmers lose 20% of their crop. Fine. They're talking about next year it could be up to 40% losses if the weather continues the way it is this year, because they've seen the 3rd year of extremes, so they're predicting for the 4th, 5th, 6th year of extremes. Irish potato crop, down 30%. Now remember, you got to remember the potato famine is what drove a lot of the Irish over to the U.S. and other places abroad across our planet. There was a famine in Ireland because they lost their potato crop. Now, granted, they were monocropping a lot, but there's more variety these days. Root crops are going to be a integral part of the movement forward in the shift of agriculture. Prices of potatoes, 900% increase. That's a 9x increase in Belgium as drought and temperatures killed all their crops. UK farming crisis, worst drought in 225 years. UK farmers to harvest a month early. Yield is significantly reduced. Italian farmers predict crop shortage because of heavy rains. Down in South America, Peru's grape exports down 11%. That goes in with Austria, Germany, and Switzerland crushed minimum 40% losses. Unusually cold winter and cold spring. This is past one. In Korea, rocketing food costs. 70% losses due to extreme weather in Australia. This is just the news rundown that's linked to this story here off of Fresh Plaza. Now let's take wheat for an example. What's happening in South Africa, they're not talking about, but it's coming to the forefront. Is it politics or is it the grand solar minimum? And it just so happens that the Constitution has been changed to expropriate land from farmers and put in whoever it is to take over the farms and run them. They tried the same failed experiment up in Zimbabwe and crop production went to zero. Now here's my thesis. I'm working on this video as we speak. In South Africa, if the world government body knew that South Africa would show the first crop losses and significant losses to the point where people would ask questions and say, hey, why did your wheat yield just get slashed to 50%? And it would be a noticeable downtrend. Australia also at the moment. But the losses in South Africa would eclipse Australia. People would ask a lot of questions. Hey, what's happening with the climate? Why are all these farmers still running their land, but they're still only able to produce half as much of the grain coming out of there? And I'm focusing on wheat for this example. As a world governing body, what if you were to create the political instability so when the crop losses came, you could cover up the crop losses and you wouldn't have to explain it? Politics to cover up the crop losses, to give you an extra few months or 6 months lead so the world populace won't wake up to, oh, crops are being lost globally because of the grand solar minimum, not because of, oh, the South African constitution changed and they want to remove farmers. You're just going to expect crop decreases. You're going to expect crop yields going to almost zero like they did in Zimbabwe. Problem solved. We just saved 6 months. Nobody will wake up for 6 more months. Then we come to Australia and they're going to have to explain why all the crops are lost. Well, they're just saying it's a drought. Now they're even saying it's a cycle of drought. It's a 100-year drought cycle. Don't worry, it'll finish in a few years. It'll be back to normal. Look the other direction. So whatever the media is telling you to follow in the news, you need to look the opposite way to really find out what's going on. So if the media says no problem with the droughts, it's going to alleviate itself. We still have some in the silos. We can import it from other places. No problem. You should be looking to the other places to see where they're importing from because there are also problems with the grain yields. So far they're talking about a 5% reduction globally in the wheat crop this year. Now that's at this estimate currently. As we march further into the harvest season, these numbers are predicted to go down, down, down. If you go over onto Twitter, they have an enormous feed of farmers in America, and this is off of AgWeb, by the way. They're talking about the USDA is absolutely insane for putting out these inflated numbers that they're putting out because these farmers are tweeting that our yields are nowhere close to what the USDA is putting out as the yield will be, even though it's down significantly tens of millions of tons. The farmers are saying USDA is putting out this, but in my fields, I'm getting 20% of what they're saying the yield will be. When the farmers actually are coming out telling the USDA that their figures are false and overinflated, and all these tweets coming along, I'm getting only half of what the USDA says we're going to get in this county. There's a huge disconnect at that point. So what they're saying in the news is one thing. Hey, it's going to be 5% reduction in global wheat yield. That's for this year when we still have what I consider stable agriculture. What happens when we progress into 2022 when everything is completely out of kilter? We're nowhere near being out of kilter at the moment. What you're seeing with this extreme weather now is still, in my opinion, what's considered normal, stable growing seasons. What we're moving to in 2021 is what I consider completely non-growable, silent, unreliable seasonal conditions that are going to wipe out our global crops to the point where we're going to have to dig into the silos every year just to make up for the demand. And at that point, after we're digging into the silos for a year or so and we don't produce the next following year, and it goes to the point where we don't have any more in the silos and we're not producing enough on the planet, then what? That's what I see in the future at 2021 or 2022. The yields right now are good, and they're going to be down 5, 10, 15% globally for just wheat. Soybeans are rocking. They're having the best ever. So are we going to switch over to a complete soy-based diet to try to switch from when there's not enough wheat? Are we going to switch to soy? How much will that push the soy price if we all start switching to soy because wheat's too expensive? Then what? How many more times can you shift to other crops? We got rare snowfalls in Uruguay. You got to realize even in the winter time, it's just the Tropic of Capricorn. They call it the temperate zone. Dropping very rare snow and hail in Argentina and very rare snow in Uruguay. Warm summers, crisp, dry winters. While not the coldest air of the season, strange moisture lingered to allow the snow in the high terrain of southeast Uruguay, which is a desert, which is strange. So you can see the moisture patterns are shifting everywhere globally at the moment. Now, if you know this and you can see the changes coming, how would you start to prepare yourself? Well, you could try to learn how to grow something in your house first. You might want to check on who's the suppliers in your area. If you can't get it from a store, can you go directly to the wholesaler and buy a larger amount with the people in your neighborhood? Can you buy a ton of something? Can you buy 5 tons of something? If that's not available, can you switch? What other crops do they offer? Because there's a bulk wholesaler in the town. Where do you think bakers get their wheat from? Do you think they buy it from a supermarket and go in and buy 1 pound of hard red winter wheat and go back to their bakery and make a cake or make bread? No. They buy it bulk from a distributor in the city. Do you know these people? Do you know where they're located? Because they're going to be the very last ones that still have food. The supermarkets will run out far before these wholesalers will. And the supermarkets are the very end of the chain. Trace it back a little bit. Do you know where these people are? How do you get there? Let's say you don't have any gas in your car or diesel in your truck. Can you still make it to this destination and get back to your house? How about just the first step? Do you know where to drive to in your city and go visit these people and start a relationship with them? Find out what their minimum orders are. Okay, the minimum order is 100 pounds of wheat. Awesome. I'll take 100 pounds right now. How much will that be? Do they offer buckwheat? Do they offer something you can sprout? What about the seed suppliers in your area? This is another one you'll need to know as moving forward in an integral part of your life. Who are the seed sellers online? I recommend TrueLeafMarket.com, heirloom and organic seeds. That's who I use for my videos. I appreciate their seeds. I like the way that when you grow it, you can harvest it and grow it again. You cannot do that with GMO. How many relationships do you have with the seed suppliers in your town? Because remember, some of those seeds you don't have to grow. You can sprout them or turn them into microgreens depending on the size of the plant that comes up. Grain wholesalers and seed wholesalers. How about the nurseries where you live? Do you know what plants are growing in your area? How about the people who are the ones in the know that are supplying all the major commercial growers? What about these people in your neighborhoods or your communities? How many of them do you know? What kind of plants can you grow quickly? What types of plants will thrive in drought condition? If you know the condition that your area is moving into based on historical correlations in a grand solar minimum, you're going to know in your local area. Just go read some history books. Go to your library. Talk to your librarian. I bet they know a lot to put you in the right direction for the right resources. Look online. There's online databases at universities. There's an enormous amount of PDF search engine. It'll just give you the PDFs that are based on the subject you're searching. If you can find out exactly how the climate shifted in your area or the local area, you could print out those documents and start conversation with other people, maybe even the growers or horticulturalists around your area. That way you have a network of people who are involved in growing food. Go to the farmer's market, find out who's there, find out who knows about the grand solar minimum. If there's a person who's producing their own stuff or their own food from a greenhouse, ask them if you can come out and see their greenhouse. Volunteer time on their greenhouse, on their farm. Volunteer to learn. You're not going to get paid to say, hey, I want to come on your farm and I don't know anything, but I want you to pay me. That's not going to work. You need to go out there, learn what you can. Start the conversation about the grand solar minimum. Do they know what's coming? It's already here. It's just about the amplification now. It's not about what's coming. It's already here. It started. That's why you're seeing all the changes. So that's kind of a good roadmap moving out. You know, you want to put yourself square in the middle of food during this time. You want to be associated with food. You want to be in the middle of where food moves and where food comes into your city, where food's distributed across your city or town. You want to be in the middle of that microcosm. You want to know how to grow your own food. You want to know others that are growing their own food, so if you have an oversupply, you can trade with them. You want to have a network around you of everybody that knows how to grow food. Because these are the people that are going to survive with the highest style and standard of living. They're not going to be the ones waiting in lines for food. They're going to be the ones where people bring their gold watches and say, I need a carrot. Security, that's a whole nother issue. Filtering water and learning water sources, that's a whole nother issue. But being in that whole food universe, if you will, should be a main priority for you right now. Even if you're listening, you should be already on the internet looking while I'm talking grain wholesalers, my city. Seed wholesalers, my city. Plant nurseries, my city. Organic gardening, my city. Greenhouse enthusiasts, my city. Now, how many groups are on Facebook that are involved in horticulture, agriculture, indoor vertical farming, aquaponics, aeroponics? Everybody you meet in those groups is a resource and something you can learn from them. And you're going to jive with one of those things that's going on. So here, you're going to learn an enormous amount. If you go through everything I just said and you visit the nurseries and the farmers markets and you get into the groups and you start meeting people, and really every single week or every day you're devoted to go out and learn something new and interact with these people and really start to learn, you got no time left. I would say 7 days a week is like a little bit too little. If you're not studying how to grow food right now, you are already behind. If you don't know where these people are in your neighborhoods and cities, you are already behind, because there's lines of people waiting because you are already You need to get yourself in there to understand where the food comes from and delivered to your city. Now, what if it's, okay, what's the next down from your city? Let's say you're in a smaller town or a city. There's going to be more of a regional headquarters where even the larger wholesalers are buying from those wholesalers. Everything you do from this point forward should be revolving around learning how to grow food, purify water, and keep it safe. Like I say, with minimal preparation coming up, with these changes that are happening right now, it is too much too quick. It's too much. We are completely unable to handle this. And then the Tokyo government, and the volcanic ash is a whole nother layer on top of that. I mean, what's going on without the volcanoes is what I'm telling you at the moment. But think about that. If you know these people and you're prepared and you're ready, even if these events happen, it won't affect you so badly. You'll be mentally prepared, you'll be physically prepared, and you'll be able to help others. And if you have that whole network of community of everybody that grows food and whatever they do, everybody has the hobby of something with food, I think you're going to be A-okay. And then go to the other extreme where somebody just watches TV. They just work, they come home, they watch TV. That's all they do. I think they're going to have a very different lifestyle moving through these next 5 years. Now, I want to bring volcanic ash into it because this new report released by the Tokyo government, this is a shocker. Every grand solar minimum, Mount Fuji erupts. Just a known fact. It erupts on the same cycles as the Cascadia eruptions and these other volcanoes that we see during the 400-year cycle of our sun. Fine, it's just science. Go back to the dates, do the research. Lots of reports out there. But the new report, Tokyo government, Mount Fuji ash eruption would smother Tokyo under 3 feet of ash. And the report goes on, even 4 inches of ash would bring the city to a standstill. This is off iceagenow.info. Mount Fuji ash eruption could smother Tokyo under 3 feet of ash. Now, when the Japanese government comes out with a think tank and full-on disaster management task force to study only the eruption of Mount Fuji and what it would do with the ash fall, you know that they know that this thing's going to erupt during this cycle. Period. There's no other way why would they say this thing hasn't erupted in any fashion in centuries? And then suddenly they just put together a disaster management task force with a new report focused fully on Mount Fuji and what the ash eruption would do when it blankets Tokyo. Now that is a very niche, very laser-pointed study to put out to be done. The last eruption was in 1708. Why would the government come out and fund a full study for a volcano that hasn't erupted in 300 years plus?